obviously, he gets caught on tape, saying some derogatory racist things.
When the legendary Undertaker is calling you out publicly, you know you've messed up big time. And Hulk Hogan, he's messed up bad. From backstage scandals to a racist rant caught on tape, the Undertaker is finally revealing why so many WWE wrestlers can't stand him. Once you hear the truth, you might feel the same. Let's get into it. How Hogan destroyed wrestling's first union. When you think of Hulk Hogan, you probably picture the larger-than-life superhero who told kids to say their prayers and eat their vitamins. You might remember the iconic yellow and red, the leg drop that conquered Andre the Giant, or the New World Order heel turn that shocked the wrestling world. But behind that carefully crafted image lies a much darker story, one of betrayal, manipulation, and self-serving politics that drove many of his fellow wrestlers, including The Undertaker, to turn against him for good. Perhaps the most damning revelation about Hulk Hogan's character is his role in one of wrestling's greatest betrayals. To understand the magnitude of this betrayal, we need to go back to 1986, right before WrestleMania 2. The wrestling business was booming, but the wrestlers themselves were struggling under conditions that would make modern labor advocates weep. They were classified as independent contractors, meaning no health insurance, unemployment benefits, or job security whatsoever. These men and women were literally breaking their bodies night after night, traveling 300 days a year, and many would end up with nothing to show for it except chronic pain and empty bank accounts. Jesse the Body Ventura had just returned from filming Predator in 1987, where he'd worked alongside actors who were members of the Screen Actors Guild. The contrast was stark. While his Hollywood colleagues enjoyed comprehensive health benefits, retirement plans, and union protection, wrestlers were left to fend for themselves in an industry that chewed them up and spit them out.
And I got up on a chair and I told everybody, now is our time to unionize. I said, all the publicity's gone out on WrestleMania. I said, if we refuse to wrestle unless union negotiators are brought in, it's federal law. They have to be brought in. It's the law.
The logic was bulletproof. With all the media attention focused on WrestleMania, if the wrestlers refused to perform unless union negotiators were brought in, federal law would require WWE to comply.
Right now, I pay $5,000 a year for health care for my family. If we had a union, I might only have to pay $1,250. Because there's strength in numbers.
Sure.
I said, what about all the guys I've seen that give 30 years to this business and in the end they ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of? If we had a union, maybe they could retire with $500 a month. Something.
Yeah.
Ventura wasn't just thinking about himself. He was thinking about every wrestler who had given their body and soul to the business, only to be discarded when they could no longer perform. He painted a vivid picture of what union protection could mean: drastically reduced healthcare, costs, retirement benefits, and dignity for workers who had entertained millions but had nothing to show for it in their golden years. The inspiration for this moment came from an unlikely encounter that Ventura would never forget.
In Las Vegas, and I got on an elevator. And you know who got on the elevator with me?
Who?
A great big offensive guard from the Oakland Raiders by the name of Gene Upshaw. Do you know who Gene Upshaw was?
Yeah.
Head of the NFL Players Association. I got on that elevator and Gene Upshaw, I said, hi, Gene. Hey, Jesse, nice to meet you. Gene's big black finger went up in the air and he goes, you boys need a union.
That simple statement from Gene Upshaw sparked something in Ventura that would lead to this crucial moment in wrestling history. Here was the head of one of the most powerful labor unions in professional sports, telling him point blank what needed to happen. Ventura took that message to heart and was ready to make wrestling history. But then came the betrayal that would haunt the wrestling industry for decades.
I gave my impassioned speech, right? The next day I go home, my phone rings, it's Vince, the union, da-da-da.
But how did Vince know? The locker room meeting was supposed to be private, just wrestlers talking to wrestlers about their futures. There were no WWE officials present, no cameras, no recording devices. So how did word get back to the boss so quickly? The answer would remain a mystery for years, eating away at Ventura like a cancer. He knew someone had betrayed not just him, but every wrestler in that locker room. Someone had chosen their individual relationship with management over the collective good of their colleagues. But who?
Me and my lawyer flew to Connecticut. Now, I can't say nothing because you sit in a deposition. I gotta stay silent. But I told my attorney the whole story. I said, if you can find out who ratted me, Who was the rat? Who was the, as we called him, what were they called in the old days? What did they call them again? Stooge. Yeah, off a stooge.
Every locker room had someone who would curry favor with management by reporting on their fellow wrestlers. These individuals were universally despised, seen as traitors to the brotherhood that was supposed to exist among performers who literally trusted each other with their lives every night. During the lawsuit proceedings, Ventura's attorney seized the opportunity to uncover the truth.
My attorney says to Vince, Mr. McMahon, he said, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince goes, no. Has anyone ever tried to form one? And Vince paused a moment. He said, yeah. He said, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it one time, years ago. My attorney said, really? He said, how did you know did you hear Mr. Ventura? Talk about unionizing?
Yeah.
And Vince said, no.
The trap was set perfectly. If McMahon hadn't heard Ventura directly, then how did he know about the union attempt? The next question would expose one of wrestling's most shocking betrayals.
He said, well, then how did you know? With no hesitation. Vince answered, Hulk Hogan told me. Now, he's under sworn deposition here. He's under sworn deposition to tell the truth.
Yeah.
There was no hesitation. Hulk Hogan told me.
The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Hulk Hogan, the supposed leader of the locker room, the biggest star in the company, the man who preached about doing the right thing, had been the one to betray his fellow wrestlers. Under oath, with the penalty of perjury hanging over his head, Vince McMahon confirmed what many suspected but never knew for certain. This wasn't just Ventura's word against Hogan's.
Vince also admitted it to Larry King when he was on Larry King, because Larry King brought it up. Is it true that Hulk Hogan's the one that ratted Jesse Ventura when he tried to unionize wrestling? And Vince said, yeah.
But why would Hogan do such a thing? The answer reveals the depths of his selfishness and provides insight into why so many wrestlers came to despise him. Jesse Ventura later discovered during his lawsuit that Hogan earned more than the entire WrestleMania 3 roster combined, suggesting Hogan prioritized his lucrative position over collective welfare. Think about that for a moment. While other wrestlers were struggling to pay for basic health care, while legends like Andre the Giant were working through agonizing pain without proper medical support, while future Hall of Famers were facing the prospect of poverty and retirement, Hulk Hogan was making more money than all of them put together. He had no incentive to rock the boat because the current system was making him incredibly wealthy.
So when I came back to Vince, I said, you don't need to worry about me. If these dummies don't want to protect themselves, screw them. I tried. I said, I got my SAG card, and I'm on retirement right now. I started at age 70. Started collecting, and I made it up to where I make over $50,000 a year in SAG retirement.
Ventura's bitterness is palpable in his voice. Here was a man who had tried to help his colleagues, only to be betrayed by the person they all looked up to as a leader. The long-term consequences of Hogan's betrayal cannot be overstated. Professional wrestling remains one of the few major entertainment industries without union representation. Wrestlers today still face many of the same challenges that Ventura tried to address in 1986. Classification as independent contractors without health insurance, unemployment benefits, or job security. How many careers could have been saved? How many wrestlers could have retired with dignity instead of dying broken? Even decades later, Ventura's anger hasn't cooled. The union betrayal set the template for how Hogan would operate throughout his career, appearing to be the good guy on the surface, while working behind the scenes to protect his own interests, even at the expense of his colleagues. This pattern would repeat itself over and over again, in incident after incident, building a mountain of resentment among wrestlers who felt that Hogan was willing to sacrifice anyone and anything to maintain his position at the top of the wrestling world. How Hogan's ego destroyed careers and companies. If Jesse Ventura's union betrayal showed us Hulk Hogan's willingness to sacrifice the collective good for personal gain, the stories we're about to explore reveal something even more disturbing, a pattern of systematic manipulation and political maneuvering that destroyed individual careers, damaged entire wrestling promotions, and created a toxic environment that turned the wrestling business into Hogan's personal playground. The most powerful weapon in Hogan's arsenal wasn't his leg drop or his charisma. It was something called creative control. This contractual contractual clause, which became Hogan's trademark demand, gave him the power to veto storylines or match finishes he deemed unfavorable. While this might sound reasonable for a top star, in Hogan's hands it became a weapon of mass destruction that would leave a trail of damaged careers and broken dreams in its wake. Perhaps no single incident better illustrates the devastating impact of Hogan's politicking than what happened at WCW Starrcade 1997. This wasn't just any wrestling match. This was supposed to be the culmination of over a year of storytelling, the moment when Sting would finally defeat the leader of the New World Order and reclaim WCW for the good guys. The wrestling world had been building to this moment, and fans were absolutely electric with anticipation. But Hulk Hogan had other plans. Hogan allegedly refused to lose cleanly to Sting, resulting in a convoluted finish involving a fast count by referee Nick Patrick, which muddled the outcome and diminished Sting's moment. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Instead of a triumphant moment that would have cemented Sting as WCW's top babyface and provided a satisfying conclusion to the biggest storyline in the company's history, fans were left confused and disappointed. The botched finish took what should have been wrestling's equivalent of Luke Skywalker defeating Darth Vader and turned it into a muddled mess that satisfied no one. But Starrcade 1997 wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern. Eric Bischoff claimed Hogan used his creative control only once, but accounts from Sting and others suggest Hogan's reluctance to put Sting over was a pattern, not an isolated incident. This reveals something crucial about how Hogan operated. He didn't always need to explicitly use his contractual power because the threat of it was enough to get his way. The damage Hogan inflicted wasn't limited to WCW. Back in WWE, his political maneuvering had already started destroying careers and storylines. One of the most egregious examples involved Bret Hart, who was positioned as WWE's next top star after Hogan's departure. At WrestleMania 9th in 1993, Hogan was reportedly on his way out of the company, with WWE positioning Bret Hart as the next top star. Hart won the WWE Championship from Ric Flair, but Hogan, who had significant pull with Vince McMahon, allegedly refused to drop the title to Hart, citing Hart's smaller stature as unfit for the top spot. The Hart incident perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with Hogan's approach to the wrestling business. Instead of doing what was best for the company and helping to establish the next generation of stars, Hogan used his political influence to undermine a superior performer simply because he didn't want to see someone else succeed. Hogan's political influence wasn't just about protecting himself, it was also about elevating his friends and allies, often at the expense of more deserving talent. In WCW, Hogan negotiated contracts for allies like Brutus Beefcake, Earthquake, and Typhoon, prioritizing his inner circle over emerging stars. The most notorious example of this nepotism was Hogan's insistence on facing Beefcake as the Butcher at Starrcade 1994, instead of a dream match with Sting, leading to a poorly received pay-per-view. A situation with Scott Steiner provides another window into how Hogan operated behind the scenes.
I got beat my first, match after turning heel. The call was made by Hulk Hogan to have me get beat. So, and the only reason I knew that because I knew somebody that was in the vicinity of talking to him. So
here we see Hogan's political influence in its most petty form. Steiner had just executed a major character change, turning heel and transforming into Big Papa Pump, one of the most charismatic and entertaining characters in wrestling history. This should have been the beginning of a major push for Steiner, but instead, Hogan used his backstage influence to ensure Steiner lost his first match in the new character, effectively sabotaging what could have been a star-making run.
We did a Nitro in Buffalo, and I knew who I had to wrestle, per se. But 10 minutes before the shows go on air, 10 to 8, I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. We had to wait till Hogan got to the building and say, clear it. Yeah, you can do what they have written down. He's a fucker. There's no other way you can say it,
Steiner's blunt assessment might seem harsh, but it reflects the genuine anger and frustration felt by wrestlers who saw their careers manipulated by Hogan's political games. This wasn't professional jealousy or sour grapes. This was the response of a talented performer who had been deliberately held back by someone who saw him as a threat. The political games extended to every aspect of WCW's operations. Hogan's feud with Vader in 1995 collapsed when both accused each other of not selling, further illustrating his unwillingness to compromise. Even when working with established main event talent like Vader, Hogan's ego and controlling nature made it impossible to create the compelling matches and storylines that fans deserved. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of Hogan's political reign was how it affected entire wrestling promotions. UCW's eventual downfall can be traced in part to the toxic environment created by Hogan's contract and creative control. His refusal to lose in UCW contributed to its decline, as executives pointed to his contract as a financial burden. The pattern continued even when Hogan moved to TNA Wrestling later in his career. TNA wrestlers felt Hogan's focus on rehashing NWO-style storylines and promoting his allies, like Sean Morley, stifled younger stars like Matt Morgan and Magnus. Even in a smaller promotion that was trying to establish itself as an alternative to WWE, Hogan couldn't resist the urge to politic and manipulate. But perhaps the most infuriating aspect of Hogan's political career was his complete lack of self-awareness about the damage he was causing. Hogan himself admitted to politicking in a 2018 Orlando Sentinel interview, stating, "Once I got in the top spot, to keep the spot, that's where the politics come in." Even when acknowledging his political behavior, Hogan framed it as a necessary part of the business rather than the destructive force it actually was. The lies, the scandals, and the reckoning. If Hulk Hogan's backstage politicking revealed his willingness to sacrifice others for personal gain, his pattern of compulsive lying and racial controversies exposed something even more troubling. A man so disconnected from reality and basic human decency that he became a pariah among the very people who once looked up to him as a leader. The lies came first, and they were so numerous and ridiculous that they became a source of dark comedy among wrestling fans and fellow performers. But these weren't harmless tall tales or innocent exaggerations. They were calculated fabrications designed to inflate Hogan's ego and maintain his relevance long after his prime had passed. Perhaps the most famous of Hogan's lies involves his supposed connection to the heavy metal band Metallica. According to Hogan, he was offered a position as bassist for Metallica in their early days, but it didn't work out. The story evolved over time, with Hogan claiming he had written letters, made a tape of himself playing, and tried for 2 weeks to get through to their management company. But the members of Metallica themselves completely debunked this story. Lars Ulrich was genuinely confused when asked about it, stating that he had no recollection of any interaction with someone named Hulk Hogan. James Hetfield was equally dismissive, responding with amusement when told about Hogan's claims. The band members' genuine confusion and amusement at Hogan's story reveals just how completely fabricated it was. This wasn't a case of misremembering details or exaggerating a real encounter. This was a complete invention from start to finish. But the Metallica lie was just the tip of the iceberg. Hogan's claims became increasingly bizarre and easily disprovable. He insisted that he wrestled 400 days in a single year, which he attributed to time zone changes and international travel. The absurdity of this claim, that somehow crossing time zones could add 35 days to a calendar year, shows either a fundamental misunderstanding of how time works or a complete disregard for the intelligence of his audience. Even more disturbing were Hogan's lies about encounters with deceased celebrities. He claimed to have partied with John Belushi after WrestleMania 2, despite the fact that Belushi died in 1982. 4 years before WrestleMania 2 took place. He also insisted that Elvis Presley was a huge Hulkamania fan who would come to watch him wrestle in Memphis, conveniently ignoring the fact that Hogan didn't arrive in Memphis until 1979, 2 years after Elvis's death in 1977. Superstar Billy Graham's account of Hogan's steroid lies adds another layer to the pattern of dishonesty. Here was a man who not only lied about his drug use, but did so on national television, potentially influencing young fans who looked up to him. The casual way Graham describes Hogan's hypocrisy, going from openly discussing steroid use in private to denying it completely in public, reveals a level of calculated deception that goes far beyond simple storytelling embellishment. While the lies damaged his credibility, they were nothing compared to the scandal that would ultimately destroy his reputation entirely: the 2015 revelation of racist comments captured on a sex tape from 2007. The sex tape, recorded without Hogan's knowledge, captured him using racial slurs multiple times while discussing his daughter's relationship with a black man, with Hogan stating, "I am a racist," to a point. The immediate fallout was swift and severe. WWE fired him, removed him from their Hall of Fame, and essentially erased him from their corporate history. But the real damage came from how the wrestling community, particularly black wrestlers, responded to the revelations. Mark Henry stated that Hogan showed a lack of effort to try to fix it in the aftermath of the scandal, noting that Hogan's refusal to engage in meaningful meaningful, reparative actions deepened the distrust. When WWE attempted to rehabilitate Hogan in 2018 by reinstating him to the Hall of Fame, the reception from wrestlers was ice cold. The New Day issued a statement expressing difficulty in forgiving Hogan, stating, "When someone makes racist and hateful comments about any race or group of people, especially to the degree that Hogan made about our people, we find it difficult to simply forget." They emphasized that their response was not rooted in hate, but in a demand for accountability. The Undertaker, one of wrestling's most respected figures, reacted to Hogan's recent return to WWE programming. During a recent podcast appearance discussing Hogan's booing at the Netflix Raw debut, The Undertaker's response was telling. When asked if he felt bad for Hogan after the brutal reception, The Undertaker's response was simple and direct. This from a man who has always been known for his professionalism and company loyalty. The fact that even The Undertaker, someone who rarely speaks ill of anyone publicly, couldn't muster sympathy for Hogan speaks volumes about how far the Hulkster had fallen in the eyes of his peers. But The Undertaker's most damning comments came when he explained why fans have turned against Hogan so completely. The Undertaker's analysis cuts to the heart of the matter. Fans didn't just reject Hogan because of one scandal. They rejected him because they finally learned who he really was behind the carefully constructed facade. The racist remarks were just the final straw that broke the camel's back after decades of lies, backstage manipulation, and selfish behavior. The Undertaker continued his assessment, noting how modern technology and media have exposed the truth about Hogan's character. In the past, Hogan's backstage behavior might have remained hidden from fans, but in the age of podcasts, shoot interviews, and social media, the truth about his character has become impossible to hide. Fans now know about the union betrayal, the political games, the lies, and the racism, and they've made their judgment accordingly. Steiner's hatred for Hogan runs so deep that it extends beyond just professional grievances into personal territory. Steiner's point is crucial. The racist comments weren't an aberration or a one-time mistake. They revealed who Hogan really was when he thought no one was listening. The carefully crafted public persona of the all-American hero was a lie, and now everyone knew it. Current wrestlers and industry figures have been remarkably united in their criticism of Hogan. Seth Rollins, despite being a childhood fan, called Hogan a victim of his own ego who hasn't done enough to redeem himself. MVP called him a pathological lying piece of human excrement on social media, tying his hatred directly to the racial slur controversy. Even AEW President Tony Khan has banned Hogan and his wife from AEW events, reflecting industry-wide disapproval that extends beyond just WWE. This kind of universal rejection is almost unprecedented for a figure of Hogan's stature and historical importance. The lies, the racism, the backstage politics, and the vindictive behavior have combined to create a perfect storm of disgust that has turned Hulk Hogan from a beloved icon into a pariah. His attempts at redemption, including public apologies and WWE's partial reinstatement, have failed to restore his reputation. His ego, his refusal to fully own his mistakes, and his history of deception continue to alienate both peers and fans. The tragedy of Hulk Hogan's legacy is that it didn't have to be this way. He headlined 8 of the first 9 WrestleManias, sparked the 1980s wrestling boom, and helped elevate wrestling to mainstream popularity. His contributions to the industry are undeniable and historically significant, but his personal failings, his selfishness, his racism, his lies, and his willingness to destroy others for his own benefit have overshadowed everything else. The ultimate irony is that Hogan, who spent his career telling children to say their prayers and eat their vitamins, became a cautionary tale about the importance of character and integrity. His fall from grace serves as a reminder that reputation is built over a lifetime, but can be destroyed in an instant, and that the truth, no matter how carefully hidden, has a way of eventually coming to light. In the end, Hulk Hogan's story isn't just about one man's personal failings. It's about the consequences of putting personal ambition above human decency, and about how the wrestling industry's culture of protecting its biggest stars enabled behavior that should have been condemned from the very beginning. The wrestlers who hate Hulk Hogan aren't the villains in this story. They're the ones who finally had the courage to speak the truth about a man who spent decades hiding behind a lie. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to watch another fascinating video like this, click on one of the boxes on your screen right now.